The red sand of Kepler 442b stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by the metal structures of the human mining colony. Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he watched his drilling crew work on the latest excavation site. They had been digging for 3 weeks now, searching for the rare minerals that made this distant planet valuable to Earth's corporations. Jake was a tall man in his early 40s, with gray starting to show in his dark hair. He had spent 15 years as a colonial marine before retiring to this quieter life as a mining crew chief. But quiet was relative. Working on an alien world always carried risks, and Jake's military training kept him alert even during routine operations. The drilling machine suddenly made a strange sound. It was a high-pitched whine that shouldn't have been there. Pete Garrett, the young technician monitoring the equipment, looked up with concern on his face. "Chief, we've hit something," Pete called out. "It's not rock. The sensors are showing a hollow space below us." Jake walked over to examine the readings. The screen showed a large chamber about 50 feet beneath their current position. The walls appeared to be made of some kind of crystalline material, definitely not natural to this planet's geology. "Stop the drill," Jake ordered. "I want to see what we've found before we damage it." The crew spent the next several hours carefully excavating around the chamber. As they cleared away the red sand and rock, a structure began to emerge. It was beautiful in a haunting way, made of a translucent crystal that seemed to glow with its own internal light. The craftsmanship was incredible, far beyond anything humans could create. By evening, they had created an entrance large enough for people to enter. Jake selected 3 team members to accompany him inside. Linda Shaw, his second-in-command and an experienced engineer, would help assess the structure's stability. Pete came along to document everything with his scientific equipment. Claire Banks, one of the security officers, provided protection in case they encountered any dangers. They descended into the chamber with portable lights, though they barely needed them. The crystalline walls pulsed with a soft blue-green luminescence that lit everything with an eerie glow. The air inside was dry and strangely warm, as if the structure itself was generating heat. The main chamber was enormous, at least 100 feet across and 60 feet high. Strange symbols covered the walls, flowing script in a language none of them recognized. At the center of the room stood a raised platform, and on that platform was something that made all 4 humans stop in their tracks. It was a prison, or perhaps a coffin. A cylindrical field of shimmering energy contained a creature unlike anything Jake had ever seen. She was massive, nearly 12 feet tall, with 4 arms that ended in elegant clawed hands. Her body was covered in an exoskeleton that shimmered with colors ranging from deep purple to bright blue. Most striking was her head, crowned with long spines that glowed softly, creating a halo effect around her elongated skull. "Is it alive?" Linda whispered. Pete was already scanning the creature with his equipment. His hands shook slightly as he read the results. "Yes, she's in some kind of stasis, but all life signs are present. Heart rate, brain activity, everything. She's been suspended in time somehow." The creature's eyes were closed, but there was something noble about her features, something that suggested intelligence and dignity. Jake found himself thinking of her as a queen, though he had no rational reason for the impression. "We need to report this to Colony Administrator Helen Carter immediately," Claire said. "This is way above our authority level," Jake agreed. They carefully documented the chamber with photos and scans, then returned to the surface. Within an hour, Helen arrived with her administrative team. The older woman's eyes widened as she saw the structure and its occupant. "This is incredible," Helen breathed. "An alien species we've never encountered before, preserved in stasis. This could be the archaeological find of the century." She immediately sent a message to the Galactic Council, the alliance of alien species that governed most of known space. Humanity had joined the Council only 30 years ago, and Earth was still considered a junior member. But this discovery was too important to keep to themselves. The Council's response came faster than expected. Within 3 days, a delegation arrived on Kepler 442b. But their reaction was not what the humans had anticipated. Ambassador Krell, a reptilian creature from the Sauridian species, led the delegation. He was tall and covered in dark green scales with yellow eyes that showed no warmth. When he saw the creature in stasis, his reaction was immediate and violent. "Seal this chamber at once," Krell ordered. "No one is to enter. No one is to study this creature. She must be left exactly as she is." Helen was confused. Ambassador, surely you understand the scientific value of this find. If we could study her species, learn about their culture and technology. You understand nothing, Krell interrupted harshly. That creature is Queen Sarath of the Velrathi. Her species nearly destroyed the Galactic Council 3,000 years ago. They were monsters. Conquerors who sought to enslave every world they encountered. We defeated them at terrible cost and thought we had driven them to extinction. But clearly, some were imprisoned instead. Another council member, a floating crystal being called a crystallion, added its voice. The sound was like wind chimes translated by their devices. The Velrathi queens were buried on lifeless worlds, sealed in stasis tombs designed to fail over millennia. This one's prison is dying. Soon the stasis field will collapse and she will suffocate within it. That was always the plan. Justice delayed but certain. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. You're saying you're going to let her die? She's helpless, trapped in there. Krell turned his yellow eyes on Jake. She is a war criminal. Her species killed trillions. This is not execution, it is simply allowing sentence to be carried out as intended long ago. Helen tried to negotiate. Surely we could at least question her, learn about that ancient war from her perspective. No, Krell said flatly. All humans are to evacuate this site immediately. Council soldiers will establish a perimeter. When the stasis field fails in approximately 48 hours, she will die, and this tomb will be sealed forever. These are not suggestions. They are orders backed by council law. The council members left, and their soldiers began setting up barriers around the excavation site. Jake stood with his team, watching through monitors as the alien queen lay trapped in her failing prison. Her chest was rising and falling, he realized. Even in stasis, she was breathing. She was alive, aware on some level. This is murder, Jake said quietly. Whatever she did 3,000 years ago, this is murder. Linda looked at him with understanding in her eyes. She had served with Jake in the Marines and knew how he thought. You're planning something stupid, aren't you? Jake watched the queen on the monitor, watched her chest rise and fall, watched the stasis field flicker and dim. He thought about the things he had seen in his military career, the times when following orders had meant allowing atrocities to happen. He had sworn he would never be that person again. Yeah, he admitted. Something really stupid. The colony's command center was quiet except for the hum of computers and the occasional beep of monitoring equipment. Jake stood alone, staring at the screen that showed the excavation site. Council soldiers patrolled the perimeter in their advanced armor, completely surrounding the chamber where the alien queen lay dying. He had sent his team home hours ago, telling them to get some rest. But Jake couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the queen trapped in that cylinder of fading light, her chest moving with increasingly labored breaths. The stasis field was failing faster than the council had predicted. She had maybe 36 hours left, not 48. The door opened behind him. Jake didn't need to turn around to know it was Helen Carter. The administrator had been trying to reason with the council all day, getting nowhere. You should go home, Jake, Helen said, walking up beside him. There's nothing we can do here. We could save her, Jake replied. Helen sighed. She was a practical woman in her 50s, someone who had spent her career navigating the complex politics of colonial administration. Jake, I know what you're thinking. Don't. The council's laws are absolute in their territory, and legally this planet is council space. We're just tenants here. So we let her die because it's convenient? We let her die because interfering would mean the end of Earth's relationship with the Galactic Council, Helen said firmly. They would revoke our trading rights, our colony charters. Everything humanity has built in space over the last 30 years would be gone. Billions of people on Earth depend on the resources and technology we get from the Council. Can you sacrifice all of that for one alien whose species tried to conquer the galaxy? Jake finally turned to look at her. Did they? Try to conquer the galaxy, I mean. Or is that just what the council says? Helen frowned. What are you talking about? I did some reading today, Jake said. Called in a favor from an old military buddy who has access to classified historical archives. The official story about the Velrathi War doesn't match the actual records. Not completely. He pulled up a file on his personal tablet and handed it to Helen. The Velrathi were an independent species living in the Outer Rim territories. The council approached them with a treaty, offering trade and mutual defense. But the treaty had a clause that basically gave the council authority over Velrathi space. When the Velrothi refused to sign, the council declared them a threat and invaded. Helen read through the file, her frown deepening. This is classified military intelligence. If you accessed this without authorization— I had authorization from someone with the right clearance level. Jake interrupted. Read it. The Velrothi didn't start the war. They defended themselves. And yes, they were good at it. Their queens were brilliant military strategists, and they had technology that matched the council's. That's why the council was so afraid of them. Even if that's true, it doesn't change our situation, Helen said, though her voice was less certain now. We can't save her, Jake. We don't have the authority or the power. Jake took his tablet back. You're right. You don't, but I do. What does that mean? It means I'm resigning as crew chief, effective immediately, Jake said calmly. What happens after that is my business as a private citizen, not colony business. Helen's eyes widened. Jake, no. If you do this, I can't protect you. The council will arrest you. They might even execute you. Then they'll have to catch me first. Jake walked toward the door, but Helen grabbed his arm. This is insane. You're throwing your life away for a creature you don't even know, a creature who might be the monster the council says she is. Jake gently removed her hand. Helen, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. I've followed orders I shouldn't have followed. I've stayed silent when I should have spoken up. I'm not doing that again. If that queen dies while I stand here and watch, I won't be able to live with myself. He left before she could argue further. Outside the command center, he found Linda, Pete, and Claire waiting for him. They were dressed in dark clothing and carrying equipment bags. Jake stopped in surprise. What are you doing here? I told you to go home. Linda crossed her arms. Did you really think we wouldn't figure out what you're planning? We served together, Jake. I know how your brain works. Pete adjusted his glasses nervously. I've been studying the stasis field. I think I can stabilize it temporarily if we can get her out of that chamber. At least long enough to get her to proper medical equipment. Claire checked her weapon. A standard colony security pistol. I joined security to protect people, not to watch them die because politicians decided it was convenient. I'm in. Jake looked at the three of them, feeling something warm and painful in his chest. You understand what this means? We'll be criminals. Earth will disavow us. The council will hunt us. Our lives as we know them are over. Then we'd better make it count, Linda said with a grim smile. They spent the next hour going over the plan. The council's perimeter looked strong, but it had weaknesses. The soldiers were focused on preventing anyone from entering through the main excavation entrance. They weren't watching the old mining tunnels that ran beneath the site. Tunnels that Jake's crew had dug months ago and then abandoned when the mineral veins ran out. Those tunnels didn't connect directly to the chamber, but they came close. With the right equipment, they could breach the chamber wall from below. The crystalline structure was strong but not indestructible. We have maybe a 6-hour window, Jake explained. The council changes guard shifts at 0200 hours. That's when they'll be least alert. We go in, extract the queen, and get out through the tunnels before they realize what's happening. And then what? Pete asked. Where do we take her? The council controls every medical facility on the planet. I'm working on that, Jake said. Trust me. The truth was, he had one card left to play, but it was a long shot. Captain Ryan Foster owned a cargo hauler called the Nightingale. Ryan was an old friend from Jake's Marine days. Someone who owed Jake his life from a combat operation that had gone wrong 20 years ago. If Jake could reach Ryan, if he could convince him to help, they might have a way off this planet, but first, they had to save the Queen. At 1 a.m, the four of them gathered their equipment and headed into the old mining tunnels. The passages were dark and cramped, reinforced with metal beams that creaked ominously as they passed. Jake led the way with a handheld light, following a path he had memorized from the tunnel maps. They reached the breach point after 40 minutes of careful movement. Above them, separated by about 15 feet of rock and crystal, was the chamber where the Queen lay trapped. Linda began setting up the drilling equipment, a compact bore designed for precision work. This is going to make noise, Linda warned. Once we start, we have maybe 20 minutes before the council soldiers investigate. Then we'd better work fast, Jake said. The drill bit into the ceiling with a high-pitched whine. Crystal and rock fell around them as Linda worked, creating a hole that slowly grew larger. Pete monitored his sensors, tracking the stasis field's energy signature. The field is at 15% power, Pete reported. It's failing faster now. We might only have a few hours left. Jake felt his heart pounding. Everything depended on the next few minutes. If the council caught them before they reached the Queen, this would all be for nothing. But if they succeeded, they would be starting something that could change everything between humanity and the Galactic Council. The drill broke through into the chamber above. Cool air rushed down through the opening, carrying with it that strange smell of age and alien technology. Jake looked up through the hole and saw the faint glow of the stasis field. "We're in," he said. "Let's go save a queen." Jake pulled himself up through the hole in the chamber floor, his muscles straining with the effort. The crystalline room was exactly as he remembered it, beautiful and eerie in its alien architecture. But now there was something different. The stasis field containing the Queen was flickering badly, its blue-green light pulsing in irregular patterns. Linda came up next. Then Pete with his medical equipment, and finally Claire with her weapon ready. They spread out quickly, assessing the situation. The chamber's main entrance was sealed with a heavy door that the council had installed, but they could hear voices on the other side. "Guards, probably 2 or 3 of them. We have maybe 15 minutes before they notice something is wrong," Claire said quietly, her ear pressed against the door. Pete was already at the stasis field, his scanner humming as it analyzed the alien technology. "The field is at 9% power now. It's dropping fast. When it hits 0, it won't just fade away. It will collapse completely. The sudden change could kill her if her body isn't prepared for it." "Can you control the shutdown?" Jake asked. "Maybe. If I can access the field's control system." Pete pulled out a portable computer and began connecting cables to the crystalline platform beneath the Queen's prison. His fingers moved quickly over the keyboard, lines of code scrolling across his screen. Jake approached the stasis cylinder and looked up at the alien Queen. She was even more impressive up close. Her exoskeleton had patterns etched into it, designs that might have been decorative or might have served some biological function. Her face, though alien, had a quality of wisdom and strength that reminded Jake of the veteran officers he had served under in the Marines. Her eyes were still closed, but her chest was moving with visible effort now. Even in stasis, her body knew that something was wrong. She was suffocating slowly, her 3,000-year sleep turning into a death sentence. "Got it?" Pete said suddenly. "I'm into the control system. It's incredibly advanced, but the basic logic is similar to our medical suspension technology. I can slow the field's collapse, bring it down gradually over about 60 seconds instead of instantly." "Do it," Jake ordered. Pete's fingers danced over his keyboard. The stasis field's flickering steadied, then began to dim more gradually. The blue-green light faded slowly like a sunset in reverse. Inside the cylinder, the Queen's body began to shift slightly as the temporal suspension released its hold on her. When the field finally vanished completely, the Queen collapsed forward. Jake caught her before she hit the ground, surprised by her weight. She was heavy, much heavier than a human her size would be. Her alien physiology was denser, the exoskeleton and muscle beneath it solid and powerful. The Queen's eyes opened. They were unlike any eyes Jake had ever seen, multifaceted like gemstones filled with colors that shifted and swirled. For a moment she just stared at him in confusion. Then awareness flooded back into those strange eyes along with pain. She gasped, a sound that was part wheeze and part something more musical. Her forearms moved weakly, trying to push Jake away, trying to defend herself. But she had no strength. 3,000 years of stasis had left her body barely functional. "Easy," Jake said, lowering her gently to the floor. "We're here to help." "Can you understand me?" The Queen's mouth moved and sound came out, but it wasn't anything Jake could understand. It was a series of harmonic tones rising and falling in patterns that might have been language or might have been music. Pete pulled out a translation device, a standard piece of equipment for humans working in council space. He pointed it at the Queen and activated it. The device hummed for a moment, analyzing her speech patterns and searching its database for matches. Then it spoke in a flat, electronic voice. "Why, you're kind aligned with them. With the murderers of worlds." Jake looked into those shifting, colorful eyes. "Humanity wasn't even spacefaring when your people fought the Council. We don't know the real story, only their version. But I know murder when I see it, and I won't be part of it." The Queen tried to sit up, but failed. Her body wasn't responding properly. Pete moved forward quickly with his medical scanner. "Her vital signs are critical," Pete reported. 3,000 years in stasis, even with the field's preservation effect, has caused massive cellular damage. Her organs are trying to restart all at once. She needs immediate medical intervention or she'll die anyway within the hour. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed from beyond the main door. The council guards had noticed something was wrong. Voices shouted in alien languages, and the door began to shake as something large hammered against it from the other side. "We need to move now," Claire said, her weapon trained on the door. "That door won't hold long." Linda had been working while the others talked, setting explosive charges along the support columns of the chamber. "I can bring down this section of the structure. It will seal the main entrance and buy us time to get back through the tunnels." Jake made his decision. "Do it, Pete. Give her something to stabilize her vitals." "Your Majesty, can you walk at all?" The Queen tried again to rise. She managed to get to her hands and knees, her forearms trembling with effort. But when she tried to stand, her legs buckled. Jake caught her again. "Linda, help me," he called. Together, Jake and Linda supported the Queen between them. She was incredibly heavy, her alien body far denser than it looked. Pete packed up his equipment as quickly as he could while Claire covered the door. The hammering was getting louder now, and they could hear drilling equipment being brought up. "Charges set," Linda announced. "We have 30 seconds after I trigger them to get clear of the blast zone." They moved as quickly as they could toward the hole in the floor. The Queen was trying to help, trying to move her legs, but her body wouldn't cooperate properly. 3,000 years of stillness had left her muscles weak and unresponsive. Jake could hear the door starting to give way behind them. Metal groaned and crystal cracked. The council soldiers were almost through. "Now," Linda shouted. She triggered the charges. The explosion was deafening in the enclosed space, and the shockwave knocked them all forward. Jake held onto the Queen as they fell through the hole in the floor, trying to protect her from the impact. They hit the tunnel floor hard, and Jake felt something in his ribs crack. Above them, the chamber's support columns collapsed. Tons of crystal and rock came down, sealing the entrance they had just used. Dust and debris rained down through the hole, choking the air in the tunnel. "Move, move," Claire urged. The whole structure could collapse. They scrambled through the tunnels, half carrying and half dragging the Queen. She was conscious, but barely, her eyes unfocused and her breathing ragged. Pete kept one hand on her wrist, monitoring her pulse, which was rapid and irregular. The tunnel seemed to go on forever. Jake's ribs screamed with every breath, and his arms burned from supporting the Queen's weight. But he didn't stop. Behind them, they could hear the council soldiers finding the collapse and shouting orders. They would figure out about the tunnel soon. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, they reached the abandoned mining outpost that Jake had prepared. It was a collection of old prefabricated buildings on the colony's edge, decommissioned years ago but still functional. Jake had spent the last 2 days secretly stocking it with supplies, medical equipment, and weapons. They got the Queen inside the main building and onto a medical bed that Pete had set up. The young scientist immediately began working on her, connecting monitoring equipment and administering drugs from the colony's medical supplies. The Queen's eyes found Jake's. When she spoke, the translator rendered her words in that flat electronic voice, but Jake could hear the emotion underneath. "You risked everything for me. Your careers, your lives, your species' place among the stars. Why?" Jake sat down heavily, his ribs protesting. Outside, alarms were beginning to sound across the colony. The council knew they had been defied, and they were mobilizing their forces. "Because it was the right thing to do," Jake said simply. "My species has a history of standing by while terrible things happen. We learned eventually that silence makes you just as guilty as action. I won't be silent anymore." The Queen studied him with those shifting, colorful eyes. One of her 4 hands reached out weakly and touched his arm. Her skin was warm and smooth, the exoskeleton not hard like armor, but flexible like leather. "I am Queen Sereth of the Velrathi," she said. "The last of my kind, I thought. If I survive this, I swear to you that your actions will not be forgotten. You have given me more than life. You have given me hope that perhaps the galaxy is not entirely filled with murderers and cowards." Jake managed a tired smile. "Let's focus on keeping you alive first. Then we can worry about philosophy." But even as he said it, he knew that what they had done would have consequences far beyond this one rescue. They had defied the Galactic Council. They had saved a creature that the Council had sentenced to death. And somewhere out in space, powerful forces were already mobilizing to punish them for it. The real fight was just beginning. The abandoned outpost had been built during the early days of the colony, when humans weren't sure what dangers they might face on this alien world. It had thick walls designed to withstand attacks from predators or hostile weather, and a backup power system that still worked despite years of neglect. Jake had chosen it carefully for exactly those reasons. Pete worked through the night stabilizing Queen Sarath's condition. The alien physiology was complex, but Pete was a talented scientist with a gift for understanding biological systems. He used a combination of human medical knowledge and careful observation of how Sarath's body responded to different treatments. By morning, the Queen was stronger. She could sit up without help, and her forearms moved with more coordination. The bioluminescent spines that crowned her head glowed brighter, casting soft light across the room. She was still weak, but she was alive and improving. "Your biology is fascinating," Pete said, studying his scanner readings. "Your cellular structure is far more efficient than human cells. If your people had this level of biological engineering 3,000 years ago, it's no wonder the Council feared you." Sarath's translator rendered her response. "We did not engineer ourselves. We evolved this way on our homeworld, which had a dense atmosphere and high gravity. Our bodies adapted to survive in harsh conditions. It made us strong, but it also made us seem dangerous to species who saw strength as a threat." Jake sat near the window, watching the colony through a pair of binoculars. Council soldiers were everywhere now, searching building by building. They had hunter drones in the air, small flying machines with sensors that could detect heat signatures and biopatterns. It was only a matter of time before the drones reached the outpost. "We need to leave this planet," Linda said, stating the obvious, "but the Council has locked down all transportation. Every ship is grounded. They're checking manifests and cargo. How do we get out?" Jake lowered the binoculars. "I have a contact, an old friend who might be willing to help, but I need to reach him without the Council intercepting my communication." Claire had been working on that problem. She had taken apart a standard communication device and modified it to use an old military encryption code that Jake had given her. It wasn't foolproof, but it might avoid detection long enough to get a message through. "Try it now," Claire said, handing Jake the modified device. Jake activated it and sent a coded message to Captain Ryan Foster of the cargo hauler Nightingale. The message was simple. "Old friend needs help. Willing to repay old debt. Respond if safe." They waited. Minutes passed like hours. Outside, the Council's search was getting closer. Jake could see soldiers checking buildings just a few blocks away. The hunter drones circled overhead like mechanical vultures. Then the device beeped. A response had come through, also encrypted. Jake decoded it and read, "I know what you did. Half the galaxy knows by now. You're either crazy or a hero. Probably both. My ship departs in 4 hours with mining equipment for the orbital station. Council already cleared my flight because it's a commercial contract. Where's the pickup?" Jake felt relief wash through him. Ryan was willing to help, despite the enormous risk. It was exactly what Jake had hoped for, but he knew it meant putting his old friend in danger too. "We have a way out," Jake announced, "but we need to get to the spaceport without being detected. That's going to be the hard part." Sarath rose from the medical bed, moving slowly but with growing strength. She was still weak, but determination showed in her strange, shifting eyes. "I will not be carried like baggage. If we must fight our way to your ship, then I will fight." "Your Majesty, you can barely stand," Pete protested. "Your body is still recovering from 3,000 years of stasis." "Then I will fight while barely standing," Sarath replied firmly. "I am the last queen of the Velrathi. I will not hide while others risk their lives for me." Jake understood her pride. He had served with soldiers who felt the same way. People who would rather die fighting than live as a burden to others. He respected it even if it complicated their situation. "All right," Jake said, "but we do this smart. The spaceport is 3 miles from here. The Council has checkpoints on all the main roads. We need a vehicle that won't draw attention and a route that avoids their patrols." Linda pulled up a map on her tablet. "There's an old maintenance route that runs along the colony's edge. It's not officially closed, but nobody uses it because it's in bad condition. We could take one of the mining trucks. They're common enough that we might not stand out." "The checkpoints will still be a problem," Claire pointed out. "They're scanning everyone who passes through." Jake studied the map, thinking. The Council's checkpoints were thorough, but they were designed to catch people trying to leave through normal channels. What if they didn't use the checkpoints at all? "Here," Jake said, pointing to a section of the colony's perimeter fence. This area is mostly automated security, no soldiers. If we can breach the fence, we can go around the checkpoints entirely and approach the spaceport from the industrial sector. That's a lot of open ground to cover, Linda said. Those hunter drones will spot us. Not if we time it right, Jake replied. The drones run on a patrol pattern. I've been watching them. They cycle through each sector every 18 minutes. We'll have a window of about 4 minutes to cross the open ground if we move fast. It was a risky plan, but all their options were risky. They gathered their equipment and weapons, packed the medical supplies Pete would need to continue treating Sarath, and prepared to move. The Queen insisted on carrying some of the equipment despite her weakness. Her pride wouldn't allow her to contribute nothing. They left the outpost in small groups, moving separately to avoid drawing attention. Jake went first with Sarath, both of them dressed in hooded cloaks that hid the Queen's distinctive appearance. Linda and Pete followed 10 minutes later. Claire came last, watching for pursuit. The maintenance route was as bad as Linda had described. The road was broken and rough, forcing them to drive slowly. But they saw no council patrols, only the occasional mining truck or utility vehicle going about normal colony business. They reached the perimeter fence as planned. Linda used a portable cutting tool to slice through the metal mesh, creating an opening large enough for them to pass through. Then they waited, watching the sky for the hunter drones. Next patrol passes in 2 minutes, Jake said, checking his watch. Then we run. The minutes crawled by. Jake could feel his heart pounding, feel the weight of what they were attempting. If they failed, if they were caught, the council would show no mercy. They would be executed as criminals, and Sarath would be killed too. Everything depended on the next few minutes. The hunter drone passed overhead, its sensors sweeping the area before moving on to the next sector. Jake counted to 30, giving it time to get far enough away. Now, he said, move fast and stay low. They ran across the open ground, a desperate sprint over rough terrain. Sarath kept pace despite her weakness, her forearms pumping as she ran. Jake could hear her labored breathing through the translator device, but she didn't slow down. Halfway across, Jake heard a sound that made his blood run cold. It was the high-pitched whine of a hunter drone changing direction. One of them had detected something, was coming to investigate. Faster, Jake shouted. They reached the industrial sector just as the drone appeared over the ridge behind them. Its sensors locked onto their position and an alarm began to wail. Within seconds, council soldiers would be converging on their location. But they were in the industrial sector now, surrounded by warehouses and cargo containers. They had cover and they were close to the spaceport. The Nightingale was there, waiting. Ryan Foster was there, an old friend ready to risk everything to help them. Jake led them through the maze of buildings, the sound of pursuit growing louder behind them. They burst out onto the landing field and saw Ryan's ship, its engines already warming up. The cargo bay doors were open, and Ryan himself stood at the top of the ramp waving them forward. "Come on," Ryan shouted. "We're out of time!" They ran for the ship as council soldiers appeared behind them, weapons raised. Energy bolts began to flash through the air, striking the ground near their feet. Claire turned and fired back, buying them precious seconds. Jake pushed Sarath up the ramp, then helped Pete and Linda aboard. Claire came last, still firing at their pursuers. The moment she was inside, Ryan hit the control to close the cargo bay doors. "Hold on to something," Ryan yelled from the cockpit. The Nightingale's engines roared to full power. The ship lifted off the ground as council fighters scrambled to intercept. But Ryan had been a military pilot once, and he hadn't forgotten his skills. He pushed the ship hard, dodging and weaving through weapons fire as they climbed toward orbit. Inside the cargo bay, Jake held onto a support rail as the ship bucked and rolled. Beside him, Queen Sarath gripped another rail with 2 of her hands while her other 2 steadied Pete, who looked like he might be sick. They broke through the atmosphere with alarms blaring and half the ship's systems warning of damage. But they had made it. They were in space, and the Nightingale's jump drive was charging. "Hyperspace in 30 seconds, Ryan called back, "unless someone wants to stay and fight the entire council fleet." Nobody objected. The jump drive engaged, and the stars stretched into. The Nightingale tumbled through hyperspace, alarms blaring from half a dozen damaged systems. In the cockpit, Ryan Foster fought to keep the ship stable while automated repair systems worked on the most critical problems. The cargo hauler had never been designed for combat, and the escape from Kepler 442b had pushed it far beyond its normal limits. In the cargo bay, Pete worked on treating Jake's injuries. The explosion in the crystal chamber had cracked 2 of Jake's ribs, and he had taken a plasma bolt to his shoulder during the run to the ship. The wound wasn't life-threatening, but it hurt worse than anything Jake had felt in years. "Hold still," Pete said, applying a medical seal to the burned flesh. "You're lucky the bolt only grazed you. A direct hit would have taken your whole arm off." Jake gritted his teeth against the pain. "How's the Queen?" Pete glanced over at Sarath, who sat against the far wall of the cargo bay. Her bioluminescent crown glowed steadily now, much brighter than when they had first freed her from stasis. "She's recovering faster than I expected. Her biology has remarkable self-repair capabilities. In another day or 2 she'll be at nearly full strength." Sarath heard them talking and rose to approach. She moved with growing grace and power, her 4 arms gesturing expressively as she walked. She knelt beside Jake, and one of her hands touched his wounded shoulder with surprising gentleness. "You were injured protecting me," she said through the translator. "The debt between us grows larger." "We're not keeping score," Jake replied. "We did what was right." "Perhaps your species does not keep score of debts and honors," Sarath said. "But the Velrothi do. You saved my life, Jake Morrison. You sacrificed your place in your society, your safety, your future. Among my people, such actions create bonds that cannot be broken. I pledge myself to your protection and to your cause, whatever that cause may be." Before Jake could respond, she touched her forehead to his in a gesture that seemed ceremonial. Pete later explained it was a traditional Velrothi pledge of loyalty, something a queen would only offer to her most trusted advisors. Ryan's voice came over the intercom. "We need to talk about where we're going. I can keep us in hyperspace for maybe another 6 hours before we have to drop out to let the engines cool. The Council will be tracking us. Every port in their territory will be watching for this ship." Jake pulled himself to his feet, ignoring the protest from his ribs and shoulder. He made his way to the cockpit where Ryan sat surrounded by flashing warning lights and damage indicators. The pilot looked exhausted, his hands tight on the controls. "How bad is it?" Jake asked. "We took hits to the port engine, the shield generator, and about half our secondary systems," Ryan replied. "The ship will fly, but not well. If we get into another fight, we're done. Then we need to go somewhere the Council can't follow us." Ryan turned in his chair to look at Jake. "There's only one place like that, the outer reach beyond the Sagittarius border. Independent systems that don't answer to the Council. But it's 3 jumps away and we're in bad shape. We might not make it. We'll make it," Jake said with more confidence than he felt. "We have to." The next several hours were tense. Ryan nursed the damaged ship through 2 more hyperspace jumps, each one taking them farther from Council space. The Nightingale shuddered and groaned with each transition, systems failing and being rerouted as the crew worked desperately to keep everything functioning. During the final jump, Linda managed to repair the worst of the engine damage using parts cannibalized from less critical systems. Pete continued to monitor Sarath's recovery, fascinated by her alien biology. Claire kept watch on the ship's sensors, alert for any sign of pursuit. They dropped out of hyperspace near a small independent station called Frontier Point. It was barely more than a collection of habitat modules and docking bays clustered around an old mining asteroid, but it was outside Council jurisdiction. Here, the laws were different, and fugitives could find sanctuary if they had something to trade. Ryan docked the Nightingale carefully, the ship's damaged maneuvering thrusters barely responding to his commands. Once they were secure, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "We made it. I can't believe we actually made it." Jake clapped his old friend on the shoulder. "Thank you, Ryan. I know what you risked for us." "You saved my life once," Ryan said simply. "I guess we're even now. Though I have to admit, when I pulled you out of that combat drop 20 years ago, I didn't expect you to repay me by making me a wanted criminal across half the galaxy." Despite everything, Jake laughed. Then he winced as his ribs reminded him that laughing was a bad idea. They disembarked cautiously, not sure what kind of welcome to expect. Frontier Point was known as a haven for smugglers, pirates, and others who operated outside the law, but it also had a reputation for neutrality. As long as you paid your docking fees and didn't cause trouble, the station authorities didn't ask questions. The station's administrator was a grizzled human woman named Kate Monroe. She met them in the docking bay, flanked by 2 security guards. Her eyes widened when she saw Sarath emerge from the ship, but she controlled her reaction quickly. "You're the ones the Council is looking for," Kate said. The ones who rescued the Velrathi Queen. The bounty on your heads is already up to 10 million credits. Are you planning to collect? Jake asked, his hand moving toward his weapon. Kate laughed. If I collected every bounty that came through here, I'd be rich but dead. We don't sell out people at Frontier Point. But you should know that the Council isn't going to stop looking for you. They're sending warships to search independent space. You can't hide here forever. We don't plan to hide, Jake said. We need supplies, repairs, and information. Can you help with that? Depends on what kind of information you're looking for. Sarath stepped forward, her impressive height making even the tall security guards seem small. When she spoke, her translator made her words clear to everyone present. I need to know if there are others of my kind. The Council buried my people in stasis tombs across the galaxy, leaving us to die slowly. If there are other Velrathi queens still sleeping in their prisons, I need to find them before the Council does. Kate studied the alien queen with a mixture of respect and wariness. That's a tall order. The Council controls most of the databases that would have that information, but there are always people who deal in stolen data. I can put you in touch with some information brokers who might be able to help. It'll cost you, though. We'll pay whatever it takes, Jake said. Over the next few days, they settled into life on Frontier Point. Ryan worked on repairing the Nightingale, though some of the damage would take weeks to fix properly. Linda helped him, proving to be as skilled with starship systems as she was with mining equipment. Pete set up a small medical bay where he continued to study Sarath's physiology and help her complete her recovery. Jake and Claire met with Kate's information brokers, rough men and women who dealt in secrets stolen from Council databases. The price was high, but Jake had access to funds from his years of saving. More importantly, they found what they were looking for. There were 7 other Velrathi queens in stasis tombs scattered across the galaxy. The Council had buried them on remote worlds just as they had buried Sarath, and like Sarath's prison, those stasis fields were failing. The queens had maybe months or years before they suffocated in their tombs. We need to save them, Sarath said when she learned this. Her voice carried absolute certainty. All of them. My people cannot die while even one of us draws breath. The Council will be watching those worlds, Claire pointed out. They'll know we might try to rescue the other queens. It'll be a trap. Then we spring the trap carefully, Jake replied. We're not alone anymore. Word about what we did has spread. I've been receiving messages from people across independent space, some of them offering to help. It was true. The story of humans defying the Galactic Council to save a dying queen had captured imaginations across the frontier. Some saw it as romantic heroism. Others saw it as a chance to strike back at the Council's authority. Either way, Jake was finding allies he hadn't expected. One message came from a freighter captain named Lucy Grant, who offered to loan them a faster ship than the damaged Nightingale. Another came from a former Council soldier, a Crystallian named Ven who had grown disgusted with his government's policies. There were others too, a growing network of people willing to help. We're starting a rebellion, Linda said one evening as they planned their next move. That's what this is. We're challenging the Council's authority, questioning their version of history. Maybe, Jake agreed, but it's a rebellion worth having. The Council has ruled through fear and propaganda for too long. It's time someone stood up to them. Sarath listened to these conversations with growing emotion. Her crown glowed brightly, and when she spoke, her translator struggled to convey the depth of feeling in her words. For 3,000 years, I slept in darkness, believing my people were extinct, believing our story would be forgotten. You woke me, Jake Morrison. You and your friends gave me back not just life, but hope. Now I see that perhaps the galaxy is ready for change. Perhaps it is time for the truth to be known. Jake looked at the alien queen, at his loyal crew, at the growing network of allies who believed in their cause. They were fugitives, wanted,